insight into something, you're getting the very best advice. I was also warned that the best advice costs, but it has a value, and the value is likely to be far greater, and the mitigation against risk is far more important in terms of getting it away at the end of the day. So when it was suggested that first and foremost we really needed to get a strong financial director on board, I was conscious with a company of the size that we had, and we hadn't made the second acquisition, so we were looking at my original company. You know, we couldn't necessarily afford a top-line, full-time financial director. And in seeking that sort of a situation, Secanta was suggested to us by one of the representatives of one of the legal teams. So I was contacted by Secanta. I put a call into them, they came back, and I met with Tim Wayne. And we got on incredibly well. Tim is bright, enthusiastic, and energetic. And so we met over 2 or 3 occasions. And Tim really wasn't just interested in the nature of the business, but was interested in the character of the business. And whilst I understood from the material that I'd read on Secanta what he was doing, his ability to do it as wisely as he's effectively done it in selecting not just the skills of the person that we needed, but the character that would fit us best, actually fit me best, because we have to work together very closely, was something that I've only seen in really, really good recruitment consultants, because that's what recruitment consultants do every day. And then we had the opportunity to meet Andy Minton, which was the gentleman that he suggested. And Andy was very different from most of the financial directors I've ever come across. And certainly those that I've worked with in advertising agencies are a very different breed to Andy. And I recognised immediately Andy was not only somebody I could work with, but somebody that I needed in order to bring about the result that we wanted, which was to take the company to market. Because it was exactly the sort of person that they needed to see, the investors, the banks, and so on. As it turned out, we've become a really good team. And that's because Andy's not afraid of hard work and understands what's required, and I'm committed to working in a particular way, which is damned hard. And as a result of that, we've been able to achieve a great deal from the start of the process all the way through and even to this day. Bringing different things. The bit that surprised me, over and above, I anticipated Andy's skill in application of his experience. The bit that surprised me was how supportive as an individual he has been. You need to bounce off somebody. When you're CEO of a company or a proposed company, you're right at point, and there are very, very few people you can actually talk to openly. And if you can't speak openly to your FD, you've probably got a problem. And Andy's been enormously supportive. And we've been able to share thoughts and concerns and occasionally, let the steam valve off as well. And that has worked tremendously well. And that's almost been as important as the financial input that he's made. It's having that other person that you can carry you through. He won't thank me for saying it, but it's a bit like having a wife at work. So we got to the point of actually we really needed to get the strategy identified in fact and in number. And Andy approached that in a very professional way. He taught me a great deal in terms of what was likely to occur. And also he didn't skimp on anything. Every advisor that you talk to when you come into this has a vested interest. So they will downplay quite what you're about to face. And Andy told it as it was. And you need that, because it will come as a hell of a shock if you're unprepared for it. Then, of course, you have the worst case scenario where you have to deal with an unpredictable market. And I don't think any of us foresaw quite how steep the downturn in the market was going to be. And the biggest issue for us when it came to it was we had a bank all the way through. There'd been a bank in discussion as we were going to AIM for several months. And in the period 4 to 5 weeks before we were to do the investor presentations, the bank dropped out. Now, the bank was integral to the model because we didn't want to borrow we didn't want to take too much money on the basis of stock because that would dilute the stock, and we're a buy and build company, so if we're overly diluted at the outset, we've got a limited amount of resource to subsequently purchase. So the bank loan was particularly important, and it was not an insubstantial sum. Andy took it upon himself to find who the representative individuals were at the appropriate level in each of the banks, got hold of them, got through to them, arranged the meetings, and then he and I went out and did some pretty ballsy presentations to those individuals. And the strength of the financial model that he put together to answer their specific questions, along with the passion in the delivery of the strategy, meant that over an 8-day period where we did several presentations, we had 2 banks come back with positive offers. And this was late October, beginning of November, and right in the middle of the subprime crisis. And by rights, we never should have been able to secure a loan. The fact that we did, I think, is a combination of it's a good idea, it's a simple strategy, well put, and the financial model was a sound one and was entirely down to Andy's competence in reading what the banks were going to require before they asked the question. And because we were under time pressure, because we obviously had the investor presentations to come, it was the finished model, not the first round model, because we needed them to squeeze their credit process, which normally would be 6 to 8 weeks, and we gave the bank 2.5 weeks. So we wanted money off them. We were a people-based business, at risk, because we were in advertising, and we needed that loan, and we got it. And I'd like to think that, well, I genuinely believe I don't think we would have got it at all had it not been for Andy's ability to talk the languages that the banks needed to hear and for them to believe in the strategy. So then we had the investor presentations, and obviously you work more closely with the brokers then, who have to get it away. And the main aspect of the presentations to the investors, as I've said, is the last page bit. What's the profit, and what's the profit going to be in the forthcoming year, and how can we back that up and substantiate it? That was a very different set of presentations, and Andy's role there was quite a different one, and characteristically he came across quite differently to the presentations we had with the banks. So whilst there was absolute passion and conviction in the way that I and the chairman had to get the point across, Andy, particularly with the investor brokers that we were seeing at the time, was the calm hand on the tiller. We needed to bear in mind that virtually everybody we saw had lost millions each day that we saw them. And particularly on one day, the Thursday, which was the worst day within the week that was the worst week, and we did 5 presentations on that day, and we came away with the money, which was unthinkable. I think even our broker was surprised by that. So all of this came through, and it was back-ending toward Christmas. We had to do some neat sidestepping, and when we came to pretty much to our deadline, we knew that at one point, when it was most critical, we were 400,000 short, and we had about an hour. So Andy and I came in here, into this room, and we sat with a blank sheet of paper on the table and said, we have an hour to find £400,000. How are we going to do it? And we turned the blank bit of paper around 3 or 4 times to see if it looked any different. And as you do, you sort of throw things up in the air. And I threw 2 or 3 things up in the air. And Andy grabbed hold of one of them, spun it around in a completely different way to the way that I'd seen it. And there was the seed of an idea. And we talked it through. And within 15 minutes, we'd worked out what our angle was. And within another 15 minutes, both he and I had made the appropriate phone calls. And 30 minutes after that, we'd secured £400,000. It's a team. And Sir Cantor has been able to provide me with somebody who I thoroughly respect, I admire enormously. I think he's made a huge contribution to our company now moving forward. I don't think we would be here if it hadn't been for the contribution that he's made. And I regard him as a massive asset to the company, and I also regard him as a close friend. I've recommended them several times already, and I would do that again. I won't recommend Andy to anybody.
It's a secret.
Yeah, it's like the nanny, or the au pair that you know is absolutely fabulous, but you'll never tell anybody about them because you know that you're going to get robbed off you. So Andy's very much that to us.
Mm-hmm.